If you want to understand how a personal brand becomes iconic, look at Jean-Michel Basquiat. He went from homeless teenager living on the streets of New York to one of the most valuable artists in history, with a single canvas selling for $110.5 million. Nearly 40 years after his death, his face and his art are everywhere. Museums, fashion, culture, sneakers. Basquiat wasn't just an artist, he was a brand. Today I'm sitting down with Doug Woodham, the author who wrote the biography all about him. The book is called Jean-Michel Basquiat, The Making of an Icon. And today we're diving fully into his story, his relationships, everything in the book that paints the story of his life and how he became such a celebrated artist. Let's jump into the show. We're going to be diving into a fabulous book you wrote that biographies the life of Jean-Michel Basquiat. It came out in October of 2025. I'd love for you to set the stage today for the audience. Tell us a little bit about Basquiat and what he is in culture today, what he's getting news for and headlines for. Why are we still hearing about him?
So Basquiat is one of the few artists who's in the twin pantheons of both fine art and also pop culture. And there are very few that satisfy those two criteria. And just a few sort of fun facts. In 2017, a painting by Basquiat sold at auction for $110.5 million. So he joined what was then and what is still called the $100 million Club, which has, artists like Modigliani and Picasso in it. There are very few. I think there are a total of 6 artists who are in the $100 million Club. Second is, if you walk around New York, walk around Paris and Singapore, you'll see people of all ages wearing shoes, T-shirts, hats, emblazoned with either an image of Jean-Michel Basquiat's face or his artwork. And that's in part due to a licensing business that his family, the estate, has created. If you look at hashtag Basquiat tattoo, there are thousands of people across the world who have Basquiat tattoos. Really fun scrolling through it because it's like, oh my God. And to give you a sense of how deeply woven he's become into pop culture, he's now a frequent clue on Jeopardy. And so, when an artist crosses into Jeopardy land, it's a sign they are part of the culture. And he was born in 1960. He died of a drug overdose in 1988 when he was 27. And so my book really has 2 halves to it. First half is, tell me about his life. And it goes from birth to death, which has all manner of personal branding because he was a master brand builder. And then most artists' biographies end after the artist died, which is, I think, not a good place to end things because most of the reason why we know about artists is because of what happened to their careers after they died. So the second half of the book traces through the sort of forces and factors behind why people around the world know about Basquiat today, because it wasn't just because of his artistry. It wasn't because he made cool paintings. It was for a whole bunch of other reasons.
Maybe we can start there because I do think that that's pretty interesting. And when things become part of the culture, when the masses start to hear about it, it's not just the people who are in the know. What do you think was some of the bigger turning points where your neighbor might have heard about him?
Sure. So I think for a very large percentage of people today who know about Basquiat, it happened because of this sale in 2017 where a painting went over $100 million. And that sale became front page news around the world. I mean, it was staggering. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Singapore Straits Times, and if you look at Google search statistics, it jumped like 6x what it had ever been before. And so it's just a reminder of big numbers get attention. So Basquiat, this young Black artist who died years ago, suddenly jumping the divide. So his global reputation soared, and it caused lots of people to go, who is that guy? So again, Google searches, maybe they bought a book. So it's a great example of a sale triggering front page news in, I mean, it was staggering. And also all the social media posts that people, who is this guy?
Yeah, I think today we might come across his work and not even know him. I mean,
Yes.
that's how I think how, like when we talk about how these things have seasons, like
Yes.
eventually the ideas live on beyond them. You may not even know what you're wearing or what the inspiration for that thing
Yes.
was. And these
Yes.
things build on top of each other. Talk about some of the licensing part of that business. How did I know it was his father is running his estate and is has been pretty good about protecting the ownership of that estate and finding ways to build some partnerships. But talk a little bit about that how he's used licensing or how licensing has been used to continue to get those his art to different places.
Absolutely. Well, maybe is the way in on that topic. Thing that might surprise many of your listeners is in the art world, most artists are terrified to have their artwork show up on licensed merchandise. They're fine if it's a poster for sale in a museum or in a book, but they're just terrified of the idea of, oh my God, if I let something go on a sneaker, will it lower the value of my high-priced work? So the person who broke that mold was an artist that hopefully many people have heard, Keith Haring. Keith Haring in the 1990s decided, I've got people spending a lot of money to buy my paintings and drawings, but let me create keychains with my images on them. Let me do t-shirts. So he sort of broke the mold. There still are very few artists that go into that territory, but Jean-Michel's dad decided to walk down that path because he wanted to keep as many of the artworks that his son had been stashing in storage units before he died. He didn't want to sell these things. Again, his dad was a trained accountant. His dad sort of learned about the art market over time. So he wanted to hold as much of this work as possible that he inherited. But there was this licensing business that he created. And it was inspired by Keith Haring, and it started tentatively, but then, like in the 1990s and in the 2000s, Basquiat became like the favorite artist of the hip hop crowd. Jay-Z, Kanye, Swizz Beatz started referencing him. And there was a co-branding that they did with Adidas that put Basquiat's images on sneakers, and things just took off. And so I mean, today you can buy sports bras, candles, china, snowboards that have Basquiat's images on it. The only thing that I found that you can't, like bongs and rolling paper,
Not gonna happen.
the estate is not licensed for that, which is good because he died of a drug overdose. It's not a good thing to do. But there's merch all over the world. I mean, it is just staggering. And so there are many folks in their 30s and 40s who are wealthy, who might dabble and collect art, who want to buy a drawing or something by Basquiat. Oftentimes, when you talk to them, they learned about it because they saw, you know, kids in Hong Kong walking around with shoes on, or somebody had a Basquiat tattoo. So all of that licensing has not hurt his high-priced work at all.
Yeah.
In fact, it's built out the base of his sort of client pyramid, if you will, for people who don't read art reviews. Maybe they don't even go to a museum, but they want to be sort of part of the zeitgeist. They want to be cool. They want to be fashionable. And if you see all this merch and it's being worn by people who look cool, it just doesn't breed conformity. I think it just breeds interest. Like, who is this? Who is that person wearing it? But it's also, why are they wearing it? I mean, it's a little bit like Che Guevara t-shirts. Like, nobody knows who Che Guevara is. And if you learned about Che Guevara, you probably wouldn't be wanting to wear a
Yeah.
t-shirt by him. He's like Mao, and that, there was lots of death and destruction associated with him. But, that's It's a Che Guevara, like it's a brand that's transcended its actual reality to become something of it's like Bob Marley t-shirts too.
Yeah. I want to talk about like the art world. Who were some of the people in that early stage that started to take it from just being he's someone in the group to someone who has work?
Right. So in the art world, collectors are oftentimes insecure about what to buy and why. And so galleries who are run by thoughtful, charismatic people who can explain why somebody's interesting and get you to buy into their view of the world, incredibly important in the contemporary art world. So Basquiat, by being in the downtown scene, seeing all these creatives, sort of figured out, well, how am I going to stand out? And part of it was how he dressed and certainly the work he created. But he also figured out who were the galleries and the people that mattered. So in a sense, he sort of did the research, he did the thinking, he did the talking, and he was able to figure out who were the movers and shakers that he might be able to get access to. He was really masterful about doing that. And people liked him. I mean, Basquiat, just his social skills were pretty finely tuned. And because he was so smart and he could talk about different topics, other people just liked being around him. And so they were happy to sort of support him. And so there are lots of stories in the book early on of who he befriended and the sort of door opening that they provided. But, two of note, one was a gallerist, her name was Anina Nozay. And Anina Nozay was a gallerist of well-known and highly regarded. And, Basquiat was able to team up with her, and she was instrumental in giving him studio space, giving him some cash that he could buy supplies. And she was the one who introduced him to most of the major collectors who were buying contemporary art in 1981 or 1982. It's like incredibly formative.
It sounds a lot like the music industry when there's like when someone finds like the right producer who just knows how to like they're a bit of a salesman, a bit of a packager, and they happen to have that next couple of relationships to how to get more people to see or hear or buy the
Yeah.
thing. It seems very
Yeah.
similar.
Yeah, great analogy. There's actually one of Basquiat's friends. His name's Vincent Gallo, and Vincent was become a musician. And Vincent knew Anina Nozay, was very close friends with Basquiat, and he used that very analogy. Anina was a great record producer, but to show Basquiat's sort of ambition, he was with Anina Nozay for sort of 12, 18 months. Jean-Michel was totally infatuated with Andy Warhol and wanted to get close to Andy Warhol because Warhol in the downtown scene was still this sort of mythic figure. And so the gallerist who represented Andy Warhol globally was a fellow by the name of Bruno Bischofberger. Bruno actually had a gallery in Zurich, Switzerland. And Bruno was just this extraordinary character who had been handling Warhol for like 10 years. And Basquiat put his line of sight on Bruno, wanting to build a relationship with him and figure out how to perhaps be represented by him. Not only because Bruno had relationships with some of the wealthiest collectors around the world who were quite comfortable spending large sums on art, but he also represented Warhol globally. And it was through Bruno Bischofberger that Warhol and Jean-Michel met, and after a period of time became close friends. And it sort of is it's a friendship often written about that helped both artists sort of elevate their career. But it's a good example of sort of intelligence, drive, and ambition, Basquiat's part, to figure out who are the players, who are the movers and shakers. To his credit, look, it was a much smaller world. I mean, the creative world today is so large, it's global. There are all these platforms. I mean, it's just the complexity of it is pretty staggering. Um, but Jean-Michel knew how to create things that were going to stand out. He knew how to package himself to help stand out. And he had the social skills and the drive and ambition to figure out who do I need to get to know and how do I sort of navigate that. And I'm not suggesting all this to diminish his artistic achievements. I mean, if somebody's out there thinking, oh, artists are all pure, and it's like, oh, they're expressing like, yeah, but like most successful artists, they're ambitious and calculated. And I think we can hold two thoughts in our brain that people have cool, expressive ideas that they want to get out. They're also ambitious and driven, and they're going to drive to make it happen.
Yeah, well, and I think we could admit that there's art, but there's also tastemakers who tell you what to listen to, tell the masses what to check out, and tell even the more discerning people, here's maybe the next thing to look at. Hey,
Yeah,
the next thing in art is happening in New York. Let's look at New York artists where you can get in before other people think it's cool.
yeah, yeah.
And so the tastemakers are important, and being an artist who recognizes that and finds those people, yeah, like being associated with Warhol, huge for your brand, huge.
Right,
Like
right.
you run in the circle, oh, he must be good too, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. And for those who are interested in Warhol, like there are all sorts of news stories about Basquiat and Warhol's relationship in the book that I was able to dig up. But one story on tastemakers that I loved writing it and researching it. So in the early 1990s, Basquiat's dead. His market tanks. There are three guys who start buying up sort of every available Basquiat, and there are profiles of them in the book that I think people would just love. It's sort of the business and aesthetics. And so they're really important. In addition to them, very successful creatives in the 1990s started to embrace Basquiat. They loved the fact that he was sort of the Jimi Hendrix of painting. They loved the fact that he produced this amazing work. And so there's a long section about those creatives. And the first one of note was the band U2. And so, the bassist for U2, we spent a lot of time together talking about this. It was just this wonderful story of U2 buying a Basquiat painting in 1991 when not a lot of the people wanted a Basquiat painting. They actually bought it with the equivalent of their 401k plan, which is interesting. And they shipped this 6 by 6 foot painting to their Dublin studio, where it hung in what was their headquarters. It was their recording studio, it was their HQ, it was where they lived most of their lives. And this hung in the dining room, which was the meeting room. And it's just this bold ass painting. I mean, I love this painting. This was priceless placement because U2 in the 1990s was, a stadium filling band of great renown. The creative world flocked to see them in their studio. You just think about the producers and all these other folks. Bowie and others would come there, and here was this Basquiat painting. And, many of the people who came to visit them had the wealth to be able to buy something by Basquiat. And the fact that U2, who could sort of talk about why they bought this painting and they loved it, again, it's just like incredible branding.
Yeah. Well, and then it's like, why did the bassist from U2 buy this piece of art? Because he didn't know much about it, so he started to study it. And who does he pick up? A curator, what do you call them?
Yeah, an art advisor. Yeah, gets an art advisor to help him. Yeah,
right. Someone who is more in the know and like understands what's cool. And again, he caught the eye and people have started to see his stuff. So it's like the celebrities out there are still like they don't always know what's cool, so they're looking for advice. So it's like, who are the key advisors But then you add to that, oh yeah, well he was with Warhol, and then it was like, okay, well now U2's got one of his paintings, and then like all the other people who are in pop culture.
Lars Ulrich from Metallica, in the second half of the 1990s, assembled like this great collection of Basquiat paintings. I mean, Valentino, the designer, was buying Basquiat paintings.
Yeah, Johnny Depp, Jay-Z, yeah.
Johnny Depp, Jay-Z. And so it became such an affirmation to the normie collector, being a little uncertain about, is this cool or not? That here were these esteemed creatives who embraced Basquiat. Actually, really, really important. And it's not as if, again, nowadays, people would be writing articles, they'd be posting them on social media. In the 1990s, that wasn't the case. This was sort of whispering, and this was like, when you went to see U2 in Dublin, it was like this Basquiat, like, oh my God, what is that? Like, this is so cool. I got to learn more about Basquiat. Or when Johnny Depp bought his paintings. So they became a little bit like decoder rings for normies, where, geez, I should. They've decoded who's important and why, and their tastes are important, and they're already esteemed creatives. They're going to know another cultural category, if you will.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And there's a lot of serendipity in the book, but I think a lot of it's kind of like, what do they say, when preparation meets opportunity? Like a small showcase leads to one person seeing you that matters. And then a larger feature finds a buyer of note, of renown that could tell his influential friends about you. A relationship could lead to you just having your rent paid for the next month so that you're still alive. Like there's so many things that connect who we are and what makes these things work. But what I got was that he took a lot of shots. Like he was a courageous guy who was
That's a great
not
point.
Not unwilling to be himself and put himself out there in places that weren't necessarily always ready to accept him. And I thought that was pretty admirable.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe just one final point on that. When I interviewed his cousin and his uncle who knew him well in his lifetime, they actually made the point of how he was very prideful, he was very intelligent, and he grew up in a world where it was expected for him to be able to live and navigate in multiple worlds. And so Basquiat was actually very comfortable dealing with people of different ethnicities, different economic statuses, gender. I mean, it's amazing how he could hang with very wealthy collectors. He could hang in the gay community. He could, hang in the downtown club scene. I mean, he wasn't code shifting. He was very comfortable living in his skin and dressing and acting in a certain way. But he had a self-confidence that I think people found interesting, and he didn't isolate himself in any particular group of people. He knew he needed to be broad in who he sort of interacted with.
I think there's a real human story there, and I think you bring that to life. Again, if you guys are interested in the book, Jean-Michel Basquiat, The Making of an Icon, came out in October 2025 in bookstores near you. So thank you, Doug, for coming on the show.
Hey, great. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Brands on Brands.